"Put this in your mouth," Mountain Man ordered the fat girl, but he was teaching her to survive. "Put this in your mouth and drink." The man's deep voice thundered through the trees. Victoria Torrey Hamilton froze, her heart pounding. She had been wandering through the wilds of Copper Ridge for 2 days without food or water. Her dress was torn, her lips cracked, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. When the stranger appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, half-covered in buckskin, she thought her nightmare had only just begun. What?" she stammered, clutching her shawl. "Do it, or you'll die here," he barked, thrusting a cut piece of vine toward her. Water dripped from its hollow core. "It's clean. It'll save your life." Torrey blinked through dizziness, too weak to argue. She pressed the vine to her lips, and pure, sweet water filled her mouth. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. She drank greedily, tears spilling down her dirt-streaked face. The man watched silently, his eyes dark and sharp as an eagle's. "City girls," he muttered under his breath. "No sense, just silk and perfume." She looked up at him, this mountain giant with a bow on his back and scars on his hands, and whispered, "Who are you?" "Jeremiah Stonecrow," he replied. "People call me Hawk, and if you want to live through the night, you'll listen to everything I tell you." Thunder rolled over the ridge as the sun bled into the trees. The storm was coming fast. Torrey had run away from civilization, but she had just stepped into a world where survival wasn't about wealth or breeding. It was about instinct, strength, trust, and the man who just saved her life would soon teach her both, even if his lessons began with orders that made her blush. Torrey Hamilton had never known hunger before. She had never felt mud between her fingers, nor fear that gnawed at her bones. The daughter of Judge Hamilton of Philadelphia, she'd grown up surrounded by chandeliers, silk gowns, and polite lies. Her future had been planned since birth, a marriage to a wealthy industrialist twice her age who treated her like another possession to display in his marble home. When her father signed the papers, Torrey ran. For the first 2 days, she'd believed she could handle anything. She had a map, a guide, and a suitcase filled with the foolish optimism of someone who had never needed to fight for survival. But when the guide discovered her family had offered a reward for her return, he vanished in the night, taking the map, the food, and the last of her safety. By the 3rd day, she could barely stand. Her body, soft and untrained, betrayed her. Her lips were split and bleeding, her eyes burned with fatigue. When she stumbled through the thicket and fell to her knees, she thought it was the end. Instead, she met Hawk. Jeremiah Hawk Stonecrow wasn't a man of words. He had lived in these mountains for more than a decade, part Cherokee, part white, belonging fully to neither world. He hunted, trapped, fished, and lived by the rhythms of the land. To the nearby settlers, he was a legend, half ghost, half savior, a man who'd once been a scout for the Union Army and walked away from war with more scars than he cared to count. When he found Torrey, he didn't see a spoiled woman. He saw a creature out of place, fragile, yes, but still fighting to live, and that fight was something he respected. "You've never drunk from a river before?" he asked, watching her tilt the vine to her lips again. Torrey shook her head. "At home, servants brought everything. I never thought—" "That's your first mistake," he interrupted. "In the wild, thinking too slow will get you killed." "I wasn't planning to end up here," she snapped, surprising herself with the fire in her voice. Hawk raised an eyebrow. "No one plans on survival, city girl. It happens to those who refuse to die. He turned away, moving toward his pack. Storm's coming. You'll stay with me tonight. Tomorrow, I'll teach you how to walk without getting lost again. I'm not staying with a stranger, Tori protested, taking a shaky step backward. Hawk didn't even glance at her. You stay out here. You'll freeze before dawn. Your choice. His words carried no threat, only truth. And so, for the first time in her life, Tori made a decision not out of pride, but necessity. She followed him. As night fell, Hawk built a shelter from pine branches and bark, his movements efficient and wordless. Tori watched, fascinated by his confidence, the way his hands seemed to understand the forest. When he finally lit a fire and handed her a piece of dried meat, she hesitated. "What is it?" she asked. "Deer," he said. "Eat." She wrinkled her nose but obeyed, chewing slowly. It was tough and smoky, but the warmth filled her stomach. Hawk didn't smile or speak again. He simply stared into the flames, as if listening to something she couldn't hear. Outside, the wind howled. Inside their crude shelter, silence grew. Not the awkward kind, but the quiet that belongs to two people learning to survive together. Tori looked at the man beside her, the wild stranger who barked orders like commands from the earth itself, and wondered, for the first time, if maybe this was exactly where she was meant to be. The storm hit before dawn. Rain lashed against the makeshift shelter, and thunder rolled down the valley like cannon fire. Tori woke to find Hawk already awake, feeding the fire with dry pine needles he'd kept under his coat. The flames flared, throwing amber light across his face, sharp, calm, determined. "Eat," he said, handing her a strip of jerky and a tin cup of hot pine needle tea. She wrinkled her nose. "This tastes like bark." "It is bark," Hawk replied flatly. "Keeps you alive." Tori forced herself to swallow. Every instinct screamed for coffee, bread, or comfort. But those luxuries had no place here. Her stomach protested, her pride flared, yet she drank every drop. She wasn't going to let him think she was weak. When the rain eased, Hawk rose to his full height and slung his bow across his shoulder. "We move," he said. Tori blinked. "Now? The ground's soaked." "Water means life," he replied. "Rain fills the rivers, softens the soil, easier to track, easier to find food." She sighed and followed, her skirts heavy with mud. The forest closed around them, green, endless, humming with unseen life. Hawk moved like part of it, silent and sure-footed. Tori stumbled, tripped, swore under her breath, and then caught him watching her. "Lift your feet, not your dress," he said. "You're walking like a porcelain doll. The earth's not out to break you." "It's doing a pretty good job already," she muttered, wincing as a thorn snagged her hem. Hawk said nothing, but a flicker of amusement touched his lips. As the day stretched on, he began to teach her in short, clipped phrases. "Smell the air. If it's damp with moss, water's near. Follow the birds. They drink where it's safe. Always test berries. Rub the juice on your wrist before eating. If it burns, it's poison." At first, his tone irritated her, too commanding, too confident. But as the hours passed, she realized every order carried wisdom born of experience. When they reached a clearing, Hawk stopped suddenly. He pointed to a small hole in the dirt. "Rabbit den," he murmured. "Watch." He knelt, setting a loop of cord over the entrance. Within minutes, a curious rabbit nosed its way out, and the trap snapped shut. Tori gasped. "You killed it?" "No," Hawk said, cutting the animal loose with swift precision. "We honor it. We eat what we kill, waste nothing. He handed her the knife. Your turn. Tori recoiled. I can't. You can, Hawk said firmly. You just don't want to. His gaze met hers, steady, unwavering. Something in his eyes silenced her protest. With trembling hands, she mimicked his motions. The act felt brutal, foreign. Yet when it was done, Hawk nodded once. Good. You faced what most people never will, fear. They roasted the meat over a small fire. The scent filled the clearing, smoky and wild. When Tori tasted it, she was surprised. It wasn't just edible, it was good, real. That night, exhaustion pressed heavy over her, but a strange pride warmed her chest. She had done something she never thought possible. She had survived. As the fire crackled, Hawk handed her another vine, freshly cut. Drink, he said. She smirked. You like giving orders, don't you? Only the ones that save lives. She looked at him across the firelight, his face carved in shadow and flame, eyes softening despite his gruff tone. And for the first time, she smiled. I think, she said quietly, you're not as heartless as you pretend to be. Hawk's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he looked away. Go to sleep, city girl. Tomorrow you learn to hunt. Tori lay back against the blanket of pine needles, staring up at the night sky. The air smelled of rain and smoke. Somewhere deep inside, beneath her fear and weariness, a new feeling stirred, not just gratitude, but connection. For the first time, she didn't dream of going home. She dreamed of staying alive, here, with him. By the end of the third week, the forest no longer terrified her. Tori could now light a fire with flint and steel, skin a rabbit without flinching, and recognize the tracks of deer and fox. Her hands were calloused, her face sunburned, and her dresses were long gone, replaced with a shirt and trousers that once belonged to Hawk. When she first put them on, she had blushed furiously. These were yours, she'd said, holding up the rough cotton. He had only shrugged. Clothes don't care who wears them. Warmth does. Now, as she stood before the cabin Hawk had built years ago, a strong structure of logs, moss, and stone, she realized she was breathing easier than she had in years. Civilization had never given her that. Inside, the air smelled of cedar smoke and herbs. A fire roared in the hearth. Tori stirred a pot of stew while Hawk repaired a fishing net by the window. Neither spoke, yet silence between them no longer felt empty. When she handed him a bowl of stew, he nodded slightly. You've learned to cook over open flame, not bad for a city girl. She smirked. Coming from a man who eats raw berries and calls it breakfast, I'll take that as a compliment. He glanced up, the corner of his mouth twitching. Careful. You're starting to sound like someone who belongs here. Maybe I do. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Hawk's expression softened, but he said nothing. That evening, after dinner, he began showing her how to use a bow. The first few attempts were disastrous. Her arrows flew sideways, hitting everything except the target. Hawk moved behind her, adjusting her stance. Feet shoulder-width apart. Draw with your back, not your arms. Breathe with the pull. His voice was low, patient, close enough that she could feel his breath against her hair. She swallowed hard. I'm trying. I know, he murmured, and you're doing better than most. Her next shot hit the outer ring of the target. She gasped, turning toward him. I did it. You did, he said simply, but the faint pride in his tone warmed her more than the fire ever could. Later, as dusk settled over Copper Ridge, they sat outside watching fireflies flicker among the trees. The scent of pine and smoke hung between them. Tori wrapped her arms around her knees. "I used to think freedom meant silk gowns and poetry readings," she said. "Now I know it's dirt under my nails and a fire that doesn't go out." Hawk nodded. "The forest doesn't care who you were, only who you are." She turned to him. "And who am I now?" He studied her for a long moment before answering. "Someone strong, someone who learned to live instead of survive." Her chest tightened. "You don't think I'll ever go back, do you?" "No," he said quietly. "And you don't want to." A few days later, Tori fell ill with a fever. Hawk stayed by her side, changing the cool cloth on her forehead, feeding her water in small sips. When she finally woke, weak but smiling, she whispered, "You didn't sleep." He shrugged. "You'd have done the same." "I'm not sure I would have known how." "Now you do," he said softly. There was something in his eyes then, something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Loss. "Hawk," she asked gently, "did you ever have anyone before you came here?" His jaw tightened. "A woman, years ago. She wanted me to live in the city. I couldn't. So I let her go." "Do you regret it?" He looked into the fire. "Every time it rains." Tori reached out, her fingers brushing his rough hand. "You taught me to survive. Maybe I can teach you to stay." For a long time, he didn't move. Then slowly, his hand closed around hers. His grip was firm, not a command, but a promise. That night, as the wind whispered through the trees, the firelight danced over two shadows that had stopped being strangers. Hawk still spoke in orders. "Drink this. Sleep now. Don't forget your knife." But Tori had come to hear the tenderness hidden within them. Each lesson was an act of care. Each command was love disguised as survival. And for the first time since she fled Philadelphia, she wasn't afraid of belonging to someone. Because here, with him, belonging didn't mean surrender. It meant being seen. Summer bled into autumn, and Copper Ridge burned gold beneath the setting sun. Life in the wild had settled into rhythm, quiet, honest, unhurried. Every dawn, Hawk checked his traps while Tori gathered herbs by the river. Every night, they shared a meal and laughter that no longer felt borrowed. But peace in the wilderness never lasts forever. It began with a noise. The sharp metallic echo of a horse's bridle carried through the pines one morning, a sound that didn't belong to the wild. Hawk froze mid-step, his instinct sharp as the knife on his belt. "Tori," he said quietly, "get inside the cabin, now." Her heart thudded. "What is it?" "Riders." His voice was low, clipped, "and not the kind who come for trade." Within minutes, two men appeared at the edge of the clearing, clean-shaven, dressed in tailored coats that screamed of the city. One held a parchment sealed with wax. The other wore the smug expression of someone certain of his own power. "Miss Victoria Hamilton," the first man called out. "By order of your father, Judge Hamilton of Philadelphia, you are to return with us immediately." Tori's breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered. He can't force me back." The man smiled thinly. "You've caused quite the scandal, young lady. Your fiancé is furious. Your father has offered a substantial reward for your safe return. We'll take you home, one way or another." Hawk stepped forward, his frame towering over both men. "She's not going anywhere." The taller man sneered. "And who might you be? Her captor?" I'm the man who kept her alive when your kind left her to die, Hawk said evenly. You've got 5 seconds to turn your horses around. Careful, Mr. Stonecrow, the man spat. You're interfering with legal business. Hawk's jaw flexed. Then the law's got no business up here. One of the men reached for his revolver, and in a blur of motion, Hawk drew his bow. The arrow sliced through the air and buried itself in the tree trunk an inch from the man's hand. The crack of wood echoed like thunder. Next one won't miss, Hawk said coldly. The men hesitated, reading the quiet promise in his eyes. They turned their horses, muttering curses as they disappeared down the trail. When the forest fell silent again, Tori realized her knees were shaking. They'll come back, she said softly. I know, Hawk replied, but now we're ready. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames, her mind a storm of fear and guilt. Hawk, she whispered when he joined her, maybe I should go. If I stay, I'll bring trouble here. He crouched beside her. You think running fixes anything? They'll hunt you. They'll call you a criminal. I've been called worse, he said, his tone quiet but fierce. Tori, I've lost too much to let fear take something good from me again. Her eyes filled with tears. But you don't understand. My father isn't just powerful. He's ruthless. When he wants something, he takes it. I understand more than you think, Hawk said. His gaze hardened, and for the first time, she saw something haunted in his eyes. The law once took everything from me, too. My land, my people, my wife. Her breath caught. Your wife? He nodded once. White settlers called her savage, said our marriage was illegal. They burned our home. She died in that fire. Oh, Hawk. He turned toward her, voice steady. I swore I'd never let anyone take what was mine again, and that includes you. The words hit her like a promise carved in stone. But before she could speak, a distant howl echoed through the valley. Not a wolf's cry, but a signal. Hawk stood, bow in hand. They're closer than I thought. Tori grabbed his arm. What do we do? He looked toward the mountains, where moonlight kissed the ridges like silver fire. We fight, he said simply. And in that moment, the forest no longer felt like a sanctuary. It became a battleground for love, freedom, and the right to choose one's own life. By dawn, the valley was unnaturally quiet. The mist clung to the trees like breath held in suspense. Hawk stood outside the cabin, his bow across his back, a rifle slung over one shoulder. Every sound, a snapping twig, a rustle of leaves, made his muscles tense. They'll come at first light, he said. Tori stood beside him, her hair tied back, her face pale but determined. She held one of his smaller rifles, the weight heavy but familiar now after weeks of practice. Then we'll be ready, she said softly. Hawk turned to her, studying her profile. The woman who had once trembled at a spider, now standing steady against armed men. You don't have to fight, he said. Yes, she replied, loading the rifle with shaking fingers. I do. Before he could answer, the echo of hooves shattered the morning calm. 5 riders emerged from the tree line, the same men from before, now joined by 2 more. The leader raised his pistol. Stonecrow, he shouted, step aside, the girl's coming with us. Hawk's voice carried like thunder through the clearing. The girl has a name, and she's not yours to take. The leader sneered. You think your arrows scare us? You're nothing but a savage hiding behind a woman. The insult struck like a slap, but Hawk didn't flinch. He simply whispered, Get down! And the moment Tori dropped to her knees, he fired. The first shot split the air. One rider fell from his horse before he could even draw. The others scattered, shouting orders. Smoke rose. Gunfire erupted, the forest itself seeming to come alive with chaos. Tori fired once, missing wide, her hands trembling, but she reloaded and tried again. The second bullet hit its mark. She gasped, stunned, as one of the attackers fell. "Good!" Hawk called out. "Breathe before you shoot!" Bullets tore through bark. One grazed Hawk's arm, blood darkening his sleeve. Tori cried out, but he waved her off. "Keep your head down!" Minutes felt like hours until the sound of gunfire faded. The survivors, the men who had come for her, were retreating, shouting that they'd return with the law. Hawk didn't pursue. He stood motionless, rifle lowered, chest rising and falling with exhaustion and rage. Tori rushed to him, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth against his wound. "You're bleeding." "I've had worse," he said, wincing but smiling faintly. Tears filled her eyes. "You could have been killed. For me." Hawk looked down at her, the city girl who had become his equal in the wild, and said quietly, "For us." Behind them, the cabin stood scarred but unbroken. The fire still burned inside, stubborn and bright against the morning fog. Tori leaned her head against his chest. "They'll come again." "I know," he murmured, wrapping an arm around her. "But so will the sun, and every time it rises, we'll still be here." And as the first light spilled over Copper Ridge, they stood together, wounded, defiant, unafraid. The days that followed were eerily quiet. The forest, once a place of fear and struggle, now stood as their shield. Hawk's arm healed slowly beneath Tori's careful tending, and each sunrise brought a fragile peace neither of them dared to name. They repaired the cabin together, mending shattered wood, replacing broken glass, and sweeping away the ash of the fight. When the last board was nailed in place, Hawk stepped back, looking at what they had rebuilt not just from lumber, but from trust. Tori lit a fire in the hearth. "Do you think they'll ever stop coming?" she asked quietly. "Maybe," Hawk said after a pause. "Or maybe they'll never find their way this far again." "And if they do?" He looked at her, his eyes soft but certain. "Then they'll find two people who won't run." For a long time, neither spoke. The snow began to fall outside, flakes catching the faint light from the cabin windows. Tori moved closer to the fire, her voice trembling. "When I ran from home, I thought I'd lost everything. But maybe I was just being led here." Hawk reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "Sometimes you have to get lost to find where you belong." She smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. "And this is home now, isn't it?" He nodded. "If you'll have it." Tori took his hand, fingers threading through his. "It already is." Outside, the pines whispered with the wind, carrying their promise through the wilderness, a promise not of safety, but of love forged in hardship and held together by choice. And though the world beyond the mountains still waited, for now, Copper Ridge was theirs. Every story of love has its wilderness, a place where hearts are tested, stripped bare, and remade. Tori and Hawk's journey reminds us that strength isn't learned in comfort, and love isn't found in safety. It's built in the firelight, in defiance, in choosing each other when the world says you can't. If you've ever felt lost, remember, sometimes the wilderness isn't punishment, it's preparation. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Tell me in the comments. And if you still believe that love can rise from survival, Don't go anywhere. The next story is waiting for you.